Hey Titans, this is Mr. Sturts back down in the Algebra Cave. This lesson what we're going to talk about is we're going to stick with solving quadratic equations, but this time we're going to show you a different method, and it's called completing the square. This works for all quadratic equations. Remember, quadratic because our biggest exponent is 2, and so we're going to solve these a little differently than last section where we solved by taking square roots. We're going to use what's called complete the square. So for right now, we're not going to solve these. All we're going to do is we're going to fill in a number in this blank that's going to help us solve these. It's called complete the square, and what we want is we want this number. It's going to be a perfect square every time. Remember, a perfect square is when we can multiply two numbers, the same number together to get that number. Okay, and here's the trick to get the number that we're going to put to complete the square. The pattern is we're going to take half of this middle number. Now remember, this is the b term. If we had our equations, remember we had a out front, we had b here, and we had c. So what we're going to do is we're going to take half of our b coefficient, our number in the middle, and then we're going to square it. Okay, and remember, squared means multiply it by itself. So we're going to take half of 6, which is 3, and square it. 3 squared is going to be 9. Okay, half of the middle number, half of the b term, and square it. Okay, so if we look at number 2 here, we're going to take half of 12. Half of 12 is 6. 6 squared, 6 times itself is going to be 36. Okay, now this bottom one, the only difference is there's a minus here. So think about half of negative 8 is negative 4. But then when we square it, two negatives give us a positive anyway. So the negative really doesn't matter in this case. It's still going to be a positive. 4 squared is 16. Okay, now the reason we want to do this is if we were to factor this, if we needed to factor, think back a while ago when we were factoring, maybe we used the X method, right? And we had 9 on top, we had 6 on bottom, so we did 3 times 3 is 9, 3 plus 3 is 6. And so how we wrote that out is we wrote x plus 3 twice, right? Because it was x plus 3 and x plus 3. Well, that's the same as x plus 3 squared. This is going to help us in the next video. This is going to help us solve these problems. Okay, so if we look at this one, think of the x method again, or think of factoring that. What multiplies to 36 and also adds to 12? Well, it could be 6 and 6, right? So we have x plus 6 squared, right? Because 6 times 6 is 36, 6 plus 6 is 12. Now look at the bottom here. Same thing, except remember we have this negative. It changes it a little bit. So we need two things that multiply to a positive 16. If we used our x method, we'd have positive 16 on top and negative 8 on the bottom. Now we got to be a little careful. We know 4 times 4 gives us 16, but 4 plus 4 isn't negative 8. So we need to make both of these negative. So when we write this out, we have two negative 4s, so it's x minus 4 squared. Okay, that's going to set us up to be able to solve these problems by completing the square.